Stephen King once wrote that nightmares exist outside of logic, and there's little fun to be had in explanations. They're antithetical to the poetry of fear. In a horror story, the victim keeps asking why, but there can be no explanation, and there shouldn't be one. The unanswered mystery is what stays with us the longest, and is what we'll remember in the end. My name is Alan Wake. I'm a writer.
When it comes to my all-time favorite video games, it's usually older titles I grew up with, and there's usually a specific reason. I fell in love with games like Destroy All Humans and Stubbs the Zombie for their humor, or Jet Set Radio and Left 4 Dead for their aesthetics and gameplay. Also because I played all these games before the age of 10, so they stuck. My top spot, however, is different. I played this game a little later, at the ripe old age of 12. But the thing is, I didn't fall in love with just one aspect of this game. I fell in love with all of it. The humor, its aesthetics and gameplay, the story, the soundtrack, and the atmosphere, so electric and engrossing, it just feels alive. That game is Alan Wake. And considering we just recently passed its 10-year anniversary, I figured now was a better time than ever to talk about it. Alan Wake is an action-adventure survival horror game made by Remedy Entertainment, who are famous for the first two Max Paynes. Alan Wake is a big departure from their previous work. No pun intended. While Max Payne is a stylized, melodramatic, third-person shooter utilizing a unique gameplay mechanic, with a story driven by metaphor-heavy writing and dialogue, maybe not too big a departure. The story is about you, Alan Wake, a famous writer who travels to a remote cabin in the quaint small town of Bright Falls on vacation with your wife. Once there, however, your wife is taken, and you wake up behind the wheel of a crashed car in the middle of the woods. As you try to unravel the mystery of her disappearance, you're stalked by the Taken, townsfolk of Bright Falls who have been distorted and possessed by a supernatural darkness that can only be fought with light. Moreover, you begin to find pages of your newest book, one you do not remember writing, predicting the horrific events as they happen, leading you to believe one of your stories is coming to life. The game plays like your average third-person shooter, aside from the fact that before you can fight any enemies, you have to burn away some of the darkness possessing them with a light source. Only then will they be vulnerable and open to bang. Not only is it a super fun mechanic that adds so much tension in cramped situations, but it just looks cool. Darkness seeps out of the possessed townsfolk like ink in water. Not to mention, there are tons of little cinematic cues for various situations that highlight how visually arresting the designs and imagery are. The whole game is visually arresting. Bright Falls during the day is beautiful to look at, nice and comforting, and every location just looks so cozy and lived in. By night, the woods are ominous and foreboding, but still incredibly beautiful, with so much detail that you can just feel the wind and smell the trees. It's cozy in a different way, with everything illuminated by the pale moonlight. I want to live in Bright Falls, preferably without the possessed creepazoids. It looks and feels so peaceful. The developers actually went out to real-life towns in the Pacific Northwest to really immerse themselves in the vibes they were going for, and ended up nailing it. It's the tried and true idyllic small town setting, where everyone knows everyone, and it's like a different world. The setting, and much of the game's tone and atmosphere, is heavily inspired by the show Twin Peaks and the works of author Stephen King, of which there are too many references at so many different parts of the game to count. But I think one of my favorites is one of the main collectibles spread throughout the areas are coffee thermoses, which is a reference to Twin Peaks in which coffee is often mentioned and praised.
This is, excuse me, a damn fine cup of coffee. I've had, I can't tell you how many cups of coffee in my life, and this is one of the best.
The game even opens with a direct quote from the King of Horror himself. It wears its influences proudly on its elbow patch sleeve. And while it may seem derivative, the familiar aspects are only that, aspects inspired by other works that, when formed together, create something beautiful and unique. The story is incredible. I'll admit I'm a bit biased. It appeals to all of my personal interests, but it's a riveting mystery thriller that keeps you on the edge of your seat guessing. Nothing is what it seems, and the inherent cosmic horror in the dark presence, contrasting the picturesque tranquility of a Pacific Northwest town, is the best groundwork for the psychological roller coaster that is Alan Wake. The way tension is built is phenomenal, and the game is approached like more of an interactive horror film, or rather TV series. The game is split into 6 episodes, emulating the format of many of its influences. And as the story progresses, it becomes increasingly warped as it plays with time, the concept of free will, and artistry, creativity. It grows increasingly metaphorical and complex, but remains grounded with a tight script and memorable characters, such as Alan's manager Barry and the sheriff of Bright Falls, Sarah. Both of which almost start out as obstacles in the beginning due to their refusal to believe anything strange or supernatural is going on, but once they both witness and encounter the darkness, they become actually helpful and useful allies and genuine friends. Plus, you spend about 90% of the game navigating through dark and twisted woods alone that by the time the various characters join you in your fight, it's a welcome change of pace against all the isolation the game puts you through. Oh, and did I mention that the soundtrack slaps to a surprising degree? The score is fantastic, but like their previous games, Remedy featured the band Poets of the Fall heavily, even working their music into the story, as 2 seemingly delusional elderly rockers you see around town are revealed to have had a heavy metal band in the past. And there's even a part of the game where you fight on stage, rocking out to one of their songs! That song was Children of the Elder God. Look it up and thank me later. In fact, just look up Poets of the Fall in general. I am forever indebted to this game for introducing me to their awesome music. I'm forever indebted to this game anyway, in all honesty, for so many memories and kind of defining a specific part of my life. I was gifted Alan Wake and its ridiculously fun spin-off American Nightmare on Steam years ago by a friend of my older sister. I actually didn't want to play it for myself at first because I wanted to experience it for the first time as a YouTube playthrough. Yes, I used to want to be a YouTube gamer. So I legitimately didn't get around to playing it until a little bit later, but once I did, oh boy. Oh boy. I fell in love. As soon as the game started in a surreal nightmare, I fell in love. As soon as the cutscenes started to play out like the best horror movie I'd never seen, I fell in love. As soon as I arrived in Bright Falls on the ferry, looking out at the small town in all of its quaint glory, I fell in love. I fell in love looking out at the lake at the cabin. I fell in love when the story took a dark and supernatural turn. I fell in love when I saw how interesting and creative the enemy designs were, and I fell in love with the concept of literally fighting darkness with light. The story, its setting and themes, the gameplay, I just fell in love with all of it and how it made me feel. Cozy and comfortable with its unforgettable locations, yet dark and alone when faced with the living darkness. It's a feeling no other game has ever given me. And it's why Alan Wake is my favorite video game of all time. I don't know what else to say, guys. I could gush over this game for hours, but it would just wind up being, well, hours of me going over each and every little detail and being like, I love it. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, share it with your friends, maybe subscribe if you want to see more. Let me know if you'd actually want to see me play through the game on this channel. I would definitely be interested in that. Have you played Alan Wake? If so, what was your experience with it? A more interesting question that I'm genuinely curious about: what's your favorite game of all time? Let me know down in the comments. Again, thank you so much for watching this, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.